And I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Montclair Interfaith Clergy Association, the Montclair African American Clergy Association, and the League of Women Voters, who are all co-sponsoring this event. My name is Rabbi Ariane Weitzman. I have served B'nai Keshed as one of their rabbis for the past 11 years, and I'm really pleased to be joined by two other co-moderators, Reverend Anita Wright and Reverend Katrina Foreman. I'm going to pass it off to Reverend Wright to introduce herself.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Anita Wright, and I serve as the pastor of Trinity Presbyterian Church in Montclair, and this is my 5th year. I am so very glad to be here with you tonight, and I am going to pass it off now to Reverend Katrina Foreman.
Good evening. I am Reverend Katrina Foreman. I serve as the Associate Minister of Union Congregational Church in Montclair. And full disclosure, have a kindergartner who will be starting in the Montclair schools in the fall. Glad to be with you all tonight.
We are really excited and honored to be hosting and sponsoring this event and getting to reintroduce these candidates to the Montclair community, hopefully getting to know them even better, but really being so grateful about the fact that we have 9 incredible candidates running for this special election. This is a historic event for Montclair, and really a pleasure to get to know these really passionate community members. So we are going to start in just a moment. I'd like to thank first our tech assistants from the League of Women Voters, Ann Moore and Peter Braley. Thank you so much for making sure this event runs smoothly. Our candidates have already been told about our time limits and the way that the questions will flow, so we're going to just get it started. And I'm going to pass off to Reverend Wright to ask our first question.
Again, good evening. We're so very excited to get to know each of you. And so tonight we want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves. But in doing so, we don't simply want you to tell us the same things like, okay, my favorite color is, and, I'm a Capricorn or whatever. That's not what we want you to do. But what we'd rather like to hear from you is what sets you apart from your other candidates? What sets you apart? And so we will begin, and each of you will have 60 seconds to answer this question. And we will begin with Miss Jeanette Williams. What sets you apart from other candidates?
Sorry about that. Thank you for allowing us to be here to share our thoughts with you. And thank you for the support that you give to the community. So what sets me apart? Well, for one thing, I hear you, Montclair. My experiences as an educator in Montclair have prepared me to represent Montclair families because I have taught at Glenfield and Nishuane schools before they became magnets, and at the Bradford, Edgemont, and Watchung magnet schools. I understand the needs and advantages of our diverse community, socially, economically, historically, and educationally. I understand how it feels to work full-time as a career educator, supplementing that income with employment part-time at a department store for 15 years and raise children.
Thank you so very much. Mr. George Simpson, the same question goes to you. What sets you apart from your other candidates?
Well, thank you very much for that question. I'd like to thank Rabbi Weitzman, Reverend Wright, and Reverend Foreman for allowing us to introduce ourselves. Thank you. I don't consider myself strictly religious, but I will say that I do carry the values I learned from the Franciscans who taught me in high school and the Jesuits who taught me in college, who taught me to question everything. And that sense of questioning everything really served me well in my career in advertising. I would say that, my philosophy was what if? What if we tried this? What if we did that? What if we tried something different? What if we looked at the problem a different way? And that really served me very, very well throughout my career. Because we can't keep falling back on what used to work, because if we're still having the same challenges, then the solutions have become the problems. So we need to dig into the problems that we've got, and we need to find targeted solutions for them. And I've done that my entire career. I'm not afraid to knock down the walls, to give our children more space to run and be themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Holly Shaw?
Sorry. Thank you so much for hosting us tonight, by the way. I just think what sets all of us apart is actually our unique backgrounds that we bring to the table. And I'm so inspired by everybody's background here. And it's a pleasure to, just talk with everyone tonight. I've been a resident here in Montclair for 8 years, and I have 3 children, and they attend Montclair Public Schools. I'm at Watchung Elementary, Buzz Aldrin, and my daughter, who attends the high school, went to Glenfield. I'm running for the BOE because I've seen firsthand the issues that are impacting our district, and I want to be part of the solution. I was personally raised by a single mother, and I grew up living below the poverty line. I graduated from a large public high school in California, which is similar to Montclair in terms of diversity and economics. And this has given me such a great perspective on the issues we face here, which really is the opportunity gaps in equity. I'm now raising my children with more resources than I had as a child, but I'm extremely aware of the wide opportunity gap in our district.
Thank you. The same question for you, Miss Lauren Griffin.
Hi, thank you for giving us all another opportunity to share our views with the residents of Montclair. I have the unique perspective of being a current Montclair public school parent and a teacher. I see our schools as a mom and as a professional. How our kids are doing in school, and is this a place that fuels my passion as an educator? The past 2-ish years have seen many Montclair families pull their children from our public schools and move out of Montclair altogether. While these moves made change for others, being elected to the Montclair board is the best way I know how to drive the changes that will benefit my own children, children in our town, and all of my colleagues throughout the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to hear from you, Mr. Noah Gale. What sets you apart from your other candidates?
Good evening. What sets me apart from the other candidates is that my energy and enthusiasm for the Montclair Public Schools. I am the only candidate who is currently a college student, and I believe I am the only candidate who is a special needs student. This gives me a unique perspective as I am still a student, and I also have a personal understanding of the importance of special education. I am the only candidate who has attended almost every Board of Education meeting for the last 8 years. I am a graduate of the Montclair Public School System, and I am currently a 3rd-year undergrad student at Montclair State University, studying early childhood education. I am proud to say that I made Dean's List every semester for the last 2 years. My goal is to become a kindergarten teacher. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Gerald Fryer, the same question. What sets you apart?
1 out of 6 Montclair students receives free or reduced cost school lunch. Every one of these children is eligible to automatically receive $10,000 a year, $40,000 to pay for college. We need to get this information out to the children and their caregivers. To do that, we have to work with the churches and the community groups because the information is not getting out now. That's an example of the sort of perspective that I will bring and the sort of thing that I've learned working towards getting my doctorate. I'm almost completed getting my doctorate in education. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The same question for you, Mrs. Dunn, Mrs. Phaedra Dunn.
Thank you, Reverend Wright. I would say my experiences both as an educator and a social worker, I've been positioned to be a voice for the voiceless and often unheard. I've become a consensus builder of people and learned the art of aiding people in humanizing one another rather than seeing one another as a set of oppositional ideologies or someone who stands in opposition to their goals, well-being, and betterment. And so being on the board would enable me to use those skills, understand the needs of all the stakeholders, and apply policy that is equitable for not only the stakeholders, but in what it does educationally for all learners.
Thank you. Uh, Next, we'd like to hear from Ms. Melanie Deisher. I apologize. Oh my word.
No worries,
Ms.
really.
Deisher, Melanie Deisher, please forgive me. Thank you.
No problem. I have 3 kids in the district, so what happens in the district matters a lot to me. And I feel what sets me apart has been, and I've been here for 14 years. So what sets me apart is my long-term participation in board meetings and other forums have given me a solid understanding of the issues the district faces and how to work collaboratively to begin solving some of these problems. I've been on a long journey attending and speaking at Board of Ed meetings. I've met with members of the administration to approve identification of children with reading issues. It started with my son not being able to read, to the district now providing universal screening for all readers. While I'm proud of this achievement, I didn't accomplish it on my own. I partnered with the NAACP. I'm on their educational committee and the Dyslexia Task Force. I worked with the Civil Rights Commission and CPAC and have been having regular meetings with district administration about this issue. I researched best practice and was able to guide the district on professional development. Montclair School District can now identify kids before they fail. Thank you.
Thank you. We certainly appreciate it. And finally, for this question, we'd like to hear from you, Ms. Yvonne Booknight. What sets you apart from other candidates?
Good evening, Montclair. In light of the conflict happening in Ukraine at this moment, my hope today and tomorrow is that a just and peaceful resolution will prevail. What sets me apart as a candidate for the Board of Education is my lifetime commitment to share my gifts and knowledge as an educator. My experiences are intersectional. Derek Johnson, the NAACP national president, said, "When you do not have a seat at the table, it's important to bring one." I bring to the table 39 plus years as a teacher leader, serving children, teachers, and parents in New Jersey public and parochial schools, as well as an adjunct at Kane University. As a retired educator now, a parent, a community stakeholder, and an advocate who believes that a quality, equitable education opportunity should be given to all students. That equitable means all children should see themselves within the curriculum design, that schools are the heartbeat of the community and should be the preparation arena for students to be career ready upon graduation. I have time now to devote wholeheartedly to this community.
Thank you so, so very much. We thank you. And now we're going to get into the heart of our questioning to get to know you just a little bit deeper.
For this next question, we will give you each an opportunity to respond in 90 seconds to respond, and I will call you individually. We'll go in a different order. So working on the premise, the understanding that there is institutional racism in our country, in our society, and so also within the Montclair public school system, and that it has in part served to create an achievement and opportunity gap. How can the public schools work to undo and repair this? And what experience and skills would you bring as a member of the board to address this ongoing problem? So we will begin this response with Ms. Griffin. You have 90 seconds.
Sorry. I think that to undo the perception of institutional racism in Montclair, we need to do a little bit of rebranding. We need to take programs that are marketed as free reading programs and take away the free. The point is not that they're free. The point is that programs are being offered after school. We need to have the same opportunities offered to every child in every school across the district. If children are getting enrichment after school, then they should be, if children are in the reading program after school, the emphasis is on the education, not on the financial component of it. I think that when we talk about I think when we talk about oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Can I have 1 second, please? Can I have 1 second? Can you bring up the question again?
Absolutely. So working on the premise that there is institutional racism in our schools, and that in part this has created an achievement and an opportunity gap. How can the public school system work to undo and repair this? And what experience and skills would you bring as a member of the board?
Right. Back to this. I think that all the programs that are being offered as enrichment opportunities are offered as simply as enrichment or as intervention opportunities. I think that putting any kind of a geographical component to them or financial component are undoing. All students are welcome to the same opportunities for enrichment, for success, and for participation in the programs across the district. And as a teacher in many different communities, I've seen this work in Brooklyn in a special ed community with a very diverse population. I've seen this work in a largely funded financial aid private school in the San Francisco Bay Area, where everything is taken away other than the fact that there are opportunities available. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for jumping in first with a quite substantial question.
Stage fright. Sorry, I was never first last time.
We'll mix, everyone will have enough, well, maybe not everyone, we will mix up the order for each question.
Mm-hmm.
So the same question, and next we'll hear from Mrs. Holly Shaw.
Hi there. I firstly want to acknowledge that I do believe that there is a systematic, racism that happens. I do believe that here in Montclair, we have such a great diverse community of people who really want to close the opportunity gap that we see and also educate our students and our parents. I think in terms of hiring teachers that are reflective of the students in the classroom is a great place to start, to make sure that we're hiring teachers of color and also addressing the algorithm of our school system and making sure that the kids that we're sitting with are representative of the diverse town that we're in. And if we start by taking steps like that are progressive, that they're tangible instead of these long-term goals, we can start by instituting these policies. I also think that there's, in terms of education, my daughter has a great history teacher at the high school, Mr. Ford, and the curriculum that he gives my daughter has taught me so much as a parent and so much to my student. And I believe that involving these teachers and educating parents and students who want to be part of the solution is a great place to start. And I think that, I talk about collaboration all the time, but I think collaboration in terms of helping a community is so important.
Thank you. So again, the same question, and we'll hear next from Mr. George Simpson.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start by telling you something of a story. When I was, I grew up in New York, and I lived in New York for a long time. And I could never figure out why, whether it was a black man or a woman in a bodega or something in front of me, whether they got a can of soda or gum or something, they always got a bag and always got a receipt. And I could never understand that. Because most of the time I would be drinking whatever it is I had online to pay for it. And then I think it was maybe the murder of George Floyd that sort of brought it home to me. I never would be challenged when I was leaving a store with something. And those folks were. And somehow those two things connected in my brain. And I realized we're talking over and about and past each other, but we're not talking to each other. And I don't know if we can tackle systemic racism on our own as a town, but I think what we can do is teach our children that we're not different from each other, that, let's grow little kids who aren't racist. And as they grow up, they will change the world for us. I know I'm not punting off the answer. I'm really not. But the best we can do is realize that each of us live different lives and different experiences in a way that we can't comprehend. And I think the more we teach that, the more we say it's okay to see the color of someone's skin, as long as that's not the only thing you see. Thank you.
Thank you. And Miss Williams, we would like to hear from you next. And we'll ask you to unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm just not used to that. Okay, I happen to have a little booklet here that talks about Montclair's magnets. I'm going to quote something from this booklet. This says that a call went out for volunteers to serve on a citizens advisory task force established to make recommendations about the future magnet programs. That was the past. That can work again for the future. And again, I'm presenting a plan, a roadmap that will help make change here in Montclair. In September of 1977, the district's first magnet schools opened, a gifted and talented program to draw white students to a school with a predominance of children of color. A fundamental back to basics program was open to draw minority youngsters to a predominantly white school. I was at that school that was the fundamental school. We had a national TV network come in to observe what was going on. They stayed in my class quite a long time just to see what was going on. So we need to do that. We also need, I was part of a group that wrote a booklet that was entitled A Teacher's Guide to Parent Involvement. It gave tips to parents of what they could do. And again, because you had community that was now not segregated but integrated, these tips went out to everyone. We also brought in programs. A colleague and I brought in a program, Open Circle. I'll talk about this next. That was a very short time, but I keep losing time because I don't unmute. Apologize.
Thank you, Miss Williams. Certainly more to say beyond the 90 seconds. So again, the same question, and we will hear from Mr. Noah Gale.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. For equity, I strongly believe and I strongly support and agree that there should be a student equity advocate position and educational efforts targeted at students of color to try to close the achievement gap in our district. I also support more aggressive recruiting of teachers and administrators who are diverse. In fact, I am taking a human rights education course at Montclair State University right now with Professor Zoe Burkholder and learning about like all this stuff like critical race theory, how it should be taught in schools when it comes to curriculum. And I think it's very important. And for curriculum we should also, one curriculum issue is that we should look into eliminating standardized testing, such as the NJSLA and Start Strong. I think those standardized tests for students are such a waste of time. Teachers have to spend classroom time preparing the students for the test, and the students get nervous about taking the test. It's not even about the student or their grades. It's to see how well the school and the state are doing. It is such a waste of time, and students lose their learning periods and teachers lose their teaching periods. They could be teaching better things to students than giving them standardized tests such as Start Strong and NGSLA. Get rid of standardized tests. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Booknight, same question to you now.
Could you repeat the question? Thank you.
Yes. So to state it slightly differently, how can the Montclair Public Schools work to undo the achievement gap and opportunity gap that is in part created because of institutional racism? And what experience and skills would you bring to help address this problem?
As an educator, I know that it is very important for children, first of all, to see themselves in the curriculum. There are initiatives that have been, mandates actually, that have been given to us by the Department of Education to ensure that children see themselves in the curriculum. I know there's a lot of talk around the critical race theory. I think if we look at where critical race theory began, it began in the court system as a way to seek attention to injustices. That's not what teachers are teaching. And so implementing the mandate from the DOE in regards to the Amistad, in regards to the LGBT curriculum, as well as the people with disabilities, that's a first step. And then secondly, looking at our curriculum and using a system thinking approach. Look at what we're putting in and what's coming out, and actually taking time to look at that data and say, this is not working, and understanding why it's not working. It's critical. The opportunity gap has been here for years. It's time for us to address it by looking at the mandates that have been put into that report that was done in 2015. The data has not changed much. We thank you for your time.
And Mr. Fryer, the same question for you now.
Thank you. The achievement gap, we've got several different achievement gaps. We've got the largest achievement gap is by income, when you look at the achievement scores. The second achievement gap is by race. We also have an achievement gap by gender. And we have an achievement gap by subject. We can close the achievement gap, but we have to make some tough decisions. One of them is that we're going to have to require our teachers be able to do arithmetic in the elementary schools. It has gotten far worse than it was when I was last on the school board, because back then, teachers had to take an exam in which they had to actually demonstrate that they could do arithmetic. Now they're allowed to use calculators and never learn their times tables, never learn how to do long division. We've got a huge gap in mathematics, and it most affects the children who are from low-income families. The second group, terrible scores, is for African-American children, and even for our white children, 30% of them are failing the math portion. So we need to both fix the curriculum, but we also need to send the teachers back to school to learn how to teach math and pay them for it. I'm not punishing them, but rather to fill this gap in their ability to teach. And this is how I see closing the achievement gap. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Deisher, same question for you.
Hi, I think the biggest key in closing the achievement gap, the opportunity gap, I would say, is because it's the inputs on the front end, is that we really focus on educational excellence in clearly across the whole spectrum, but really in those early grades, K through 5. We really need to knock it out of the ballpark in those core subjects, because there's huge gaps. I mean, I focus on literacy when I'm talking about stuff, but there's big gaps in math too. So really solid education in mathematics and reading and writing for all kids across K through 5. And that gives them a start so that everyone has an even chance to achieve and have access to the higher levels of academic success. A big part of this is supporting our teachers, truly supporting them, bringing them to the table, asking what professional development they need, what resources they need. And I feel like giving them professional development opportunities for mentoring and support, time in their schedule for collaborative planning gives them the resources to work for our kids. And together we really can, squish the gap rather than continue to see it widen. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mrs. Dunn, same question to you.
Thank you, Reverend Foreman. So when we're talking about the achievement gap, as many of my colleagues, before me have said, there's a wide number of things. There are a number of achievement gaps in socioeconomic status, race, gender, they exist. But the answer to that is equity. Often in education, we think it's a one size fits all approach. We bring in, if you were bringing in shoes for your class, you wouldn't bring in all size 8 shoes. You would ask each child what size shoe they wear. So we have to look at students as individuals in solving this problem. We have to bring in the parents. We have to work with the teachers. An example would be, a teacher talking with a parent and saying, what do you see going on at home with Phaedra, and where do you see an issue in the learning? And I would say, here are some things I see that are concerns in learning with this student. In addition to that, we need curriculum maps so that across the board in all 6th grade classes in math, we are working on the same thing. A curriculum map shows what's going on for the entire school year. And then what we would do then is the teachers would build their lesson plans, but they would utilize social emotional learning for the students. They would utilize looking individually and helping students see themselves in the questions that are asked, and also asking the students, how would you like to show mastery in this thing we've covered in math? Would you like to take a test? Would you like to take a quiz? Would you like to do something else to show that you have mastery? And so we have to include parents, teachers, students, everyone in this so everyone can see themselves, but students most importantly.
Turn it over to Rabbi Weitzman for our next question.
Thank you so much. So it was such a pleasure to hear you speak for the full 90 seconds. We're going to do the same thing again and give you that minute and a half to respond. Wish we could give you even more. We received many questions in the lead up to this forum around student safety. So we would like to give you an opportunity to talk about some of the pressing issues related to student and staff safety. For example, during the pandemic, student mental health concerns were exacerbated, and there was a question about how the schools can support students in these areas. We've also heard about concerns around building infrastructure and other physical safety concerns for many years. Bullying is another pressing student safety issue. And of course, right now we are living through a pandemic, which threatens our safety all the time. What do you see as the board's role in ensuring student safety? And how can the district best respond to these student safety concerns? And we're going to give you 90 seconds to answer these questions, whatever speaks to you in that rather large question. So I'm going to call first on Mr. Gale to respond.
Okay, so I'm sorry, can I repeat the question, please? I was listening, but I didn't memorize the question.
Of course, it was a long one. The gist is, what do you see the board's role in ensuring student safety? That's physical safety, mental health safety, safety between students. How can you see the board's role in ensuring student safety, and how can the district best respond to student safety concerns? You might also include in there staff safety.
Staff safety. We can better serve special education students by employing more paraprofessionals, adding more inclusion classes, and having smaller classes overall. All of these improvements cost money, so we might not be able to do as much as we would like, but I think they're really important. And then I also think that we should for mental health, when it comes to mental health, there should be something called a lunch bunch, where students who feel excluded by their peers or their friends, they can make new peers by having a lunch bunch when they get blown off by friends and left out. I still remember, here's a story actually. When I was in high school, my freshman year of high school, I was like 13, 14 at the time. Actually, I was 14. I was like 14 at times. There were 3 people named Sam, and Miles who excluded me. And I was like, oh no. And then and then the following year, after when I was over, I came up with a solution. I actually went and spoke about board of me, saying there should be a lunch bunch, peer intervention, something like that, for kids to get to know their peers, as well as as well as so that way they don't feel excluded and left out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gill. Mr. Fryer, same question to you.
Thank you. The role of the board is to set policies and to hold the administration accountable. For example, let's talk about mental health. Obviously, this is a problem both for the staff and also for the students. Let's talk about student mental health for a moment. We have ways to measure. First of all, we need to see where the problems are, and we need to call upon the administration to do assessments to figure out where the problems are. Where are the students nervous, anxious? Where are the problems in their social well-being and their emotional well-being? And what is the administration going to do about it? What is their program? How are we going to measure whether or not we have made progress in addressing these concerns? The same thing with safety. Of course, we want all children to be safe, but how are we going to measure it? How are we going to know whether or not we are doing it and being successful at it? And of course, we've got some fake safety issues, such as the infrastructure in the schools. The ventilation system has been working as it does now for the past 30 years, which is not working at all. That's because these schools were built where the ventilation system was to open up the windows. Actually, the ventilation system doesn't go into the classrooms. It goes to the closed areas like the gym. Naturally, we want to look at the safety. What we want to look at is what is the air quality in all of these rooms and see where the air quality is. And the board should tell the superintendent, okay, check the air quality and have a way to correct it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fryer. I'm going to pass it along to Mrs. Dunn. Same question.
Thank you, Rabbi. Such a large question, so much to touch on here. I think one of the key things, I guess I'm going to spend more time with the HIP piece, and there were some other things, the mental health piece. And one of the first things we need to do is norm around values, ethics, like, you know, if we're utilizing restorative justice and or character education, you know, students should be discussing norms that we utilize in the classroom, in the school, on the bus, in all places educational when they get home. And so I think one of the issues with the harassment, intimidation, and bullying with the HIP reports is we're not norming with the children and utilizing the language consistently enough so that the kids understand these are values that we share as a community. And if I violate community values, I have to go back to the community and make amends and do things of that nature. I think when we're talking about the mental health piece, we have to talk about depression, anxiety, and a number of other issues that are happening. And I think we have to utilize surveys. We can talk with the children, let children confidentially fill out surveys if they feel they need help. We need to send surveys home to parents. We need surveys for staff and teachers. And what we can do there is build a program where people can utilize mental health services to help them at whatever time of the day, because you know, it could be a class that makes you more anxious. It could be coming in the morning. And so if we build things around that, I think that would be helpful for everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Ms. Deischer, what do you see as the board's role in ensuring student and staff safety? And I'd like to hear from you.
It's a giant question, so I'll move quickly. For the physical safety, I believe the board has a responsibility. Hopefully this bond will be filled in and go to state and we'll have something to present, but our role will be to present it to the public and really garner support so it can pass in November and we can begin on much needed repairs. Staff safety, that's part of that bond referendum, but also bringing them to the table and finding out what makes teachers and staff feel safe in the building, and they need to be included in decisions that are happening. Finally, the mental health. I do think, like Mr. Freeman introduced some really cool programs at the high school. We have restorative justice that focuses on promoting healthy relationships and support of each other. Like, we have some really great things in place. Let's spread those best practices around. What's working, we don't have to reinvent the wheel in each school, but we need to make sure it's equitably spread out amongst all schools so we're serving everyone well and supporting everyone's mental health. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deischer. Ms. Booknight, we'd love to hear from you. Same question.
Yes, the board's role is to assure that policies that have been put in place are carried through. Everyone wants to be safe. I want to make sure that when I send my child off to school, they're safe. And it's the board's responsibility to make sure that things are in place so that they can feel safe. We have implemented policies for restorative justice. We have teachers on special assignment who are working part-time in addition to making sure that they're also carrying out their social studies curriculum or whatever core content area they may be assigned to. It's important that those initiatives, when we talk about bullying, when we talk about someone's emotional state or mental state, that restorative justice initiative has been designed to build communities, to create a positive and a less punitive interactions within the school and the community. These circles not only have been initiated in schools at a part-time level, but they've also gone out into the community and also have enacted different initiatives through the restorative justice. There's a farm to table initiative. There are small libraries being built around the town. These are all things that build a community, and relationships are important. They are the foundation for people to have relationships, to feel good about one another, to express the tolerance that is needed in order to have a vibrant working community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Booknight. Ms. Williams, same question.
Yes. Speaking, in order to have safety, we have to have conversations. And again, I have posted my roadmap for having these various things take place. And when I say these things, I'm talking about the policies, the programs. Restorative justice is a program, and I happen to have the book here, that says its idea is creating just and equitable learning environments, nurturing healthy relationships, repairing harm and transforming conflict. Circle conversations help to make that. The idea of being in a circle, facing one another, talking to one another, going over those hard times. Sandra McKnight and I wrote a grant that brought Open Circle, which was the onset, which brought that whole idea into restorative justice here to Montclair so that the staff members would be able to have professional development and move forward with that. And I have also, being an education chair with the Montclair League of Women Voters, had workshops, forums for discussing cyberbullying so that the parents would know what to do. When we're talking about health safety, that's ventilation as well. You need to use the scientific method when looking at the ventilation problems that exist. What can be done? We need to partner with community partners, corporations and so forth, so that we can bring them on board and ask for their help. And I will use my expertise that I have had with my training, which I'll mention later, to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Simpson, we'll turn towards you. We are still asking the question, what is the board's role in ensuring student and staff safety?
Thank you very much. Well, I think that obviously the board's role is to set policy and agenda and priorities. So we need to deal with, a couple of different things at the same time. Obviously, physical safety, we need to separate that from emotional and safety and mental health issues. But in terms of the infrastructure, I know inspections have been done, but I think we need a full assessment of every building to make sure that they're safe. One of the things that inspired me to run was hearing about not one, but two stairwells collapsing in the high school. That's unacceptable. I mean, the entire board should have resigned, just decades of neglect. So we need to assess all the buildings, not just the HVAC systems, but all the buildings. Are they safe? What needs to be done immediately? What can wait? What are safety issues? The second one is, the emotional health and safety of the children, the teachers, and everybody involved. If, like Ms. Deischer was saying, if there are programs and policies that are working, let's expand them. If they're not working, let's figure out why they're not working and change them. We need to communicate with teachers and let them know that we've got their back. Ask teachers what they need, how, what works one-on-one with a student. Can we expand that? Let's get our teachers to be, to bring ideas to us to help with their students as well. So we figure out what's working, we stick with that, we expand it, we figure out what's not working, we abandon it, and we move on. It's really about setting the policy, the agenda, and letting everybody know that we're there, and that's what we're doing. That's our role. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Mrs. Shaw.
I think this is such a great question because I think safety sort of encompasses both like a physical aspect. As parents, we want our kids to feel safe and we want them to feel safe in school, but it also encompasses sort of the mental aspect like Mrs. Dunn was talking about, which is so important. I mean, I think personally, I don't want my kid worried to go to school. So I think basic safety, like upgrading our ventilation so kids feel safe and not anxious in COVID times, attending school is important. I think, basic things like putting locks on bathrooms at the high school is important. And, our kids should feel safe crossing the street. I know there's problems at Edgemont with, kids feeling unsafe crossing a busy corner. I know we have issues at Watchung. Basic safety in those realms is really important for kids' well-being and going to school. And also, I just want to touch on the mental health because, and also cyberbullying, which I feel is just kind of all encompassing. And I do want to highlight that the MFEE has brought in like a suicide prevention, education to the high school. And I really hope it can roll out into the middle school as well, because I think it does need to be taught earlier. But I think in terms of mental health, we know from studies that kids did not learn at home as they did in schools. And the ERs and pediatricians are seeing spikes in mental health. And we're seeing behavior issues, anxiety, stress, depression, and suicide. And I think, and I hope that in this town, we can give the resources to our kids that need the help through grants, through counselors. They need it.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. And last but not least, Ms. Griffin.
I think coming back from having our kids home for almost 2 years, we're seeing in the schools that our kids don't have coping skills. They don't have the relationship skills seem to have atrophied, if you will. There's a lack of impulse control, and we're seeing that students' reactions to disappointment and to usually typical elementary and middle school situations seem to be quite over the top. So social emotional learning, bullying, these are all, they're going hand in hand. This is the Super Bowl for our school counselors. I think that our school board really need to make sure that our schools are adequately staffed so we don't see school counselors doing things like lunch duty and bus duty. They're using that time, kind of downtime, to do relationship building skills with students, to meeting with at-risk students and peers, to get in the way of anything that could be a further detriment to their social and emotional health. We need our kids to be part of a conflict resolution program. Some schools have the bucket filling initiative. Whatever it is, I agree with Ms. Dunn that we need as a community to share the community values and expectations for behavior, for how we treat each other. And I think that this will see our students as a whole really start to heal and start to go back to having healthy relationships. If we look at programs like responsive classrooms, we see a way to do this in the classroom every day, so that the classroom teachers are also part of the social and emotional learning and keeping the environment and the climate stable.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. I'm going to pass it on to Reverend Wright to ask the next question.
So we've heard you talk about some of the pressing issues. One of the things that we'd like to ask you is how can the school board support the Montclair Public School staff to ensure retention of staff and a supportive environment for new staff? The second part of that question is, do you think this type of this support has or has not happened effectively in the past, and why? And then finally, though, what policy or activity would you advocate for to improve both retention of staff and further professional development of our current staff? And we will begin with Mrs. Shaw.
Hi, I think it's so important, firstly, to collaborate and communicate with the teachers so they feel involved and they feel listened to and heard. And I think they have such great ideas that it's important that we listen to them. And I think that goes to the question of retaining staff. I know in the last few years, we cut staff during budget cuts. And as a new, when you work so hard to hire a teacher and find a qualified teacher, and they know that they're probably going to get laid off because they're a new teacher, we're not going to retain them. And also in that same respect, if teachers don't feel respected and heard or even valued in this community, they're not going to stay around. And I think we've seen a little bit of that. In terms of what I would do, I really hope that we begin to collaborate with teachers. I think that they're on the front line. They have ideas, they're innovative. I heard from a teacher this week about, basically there used to be a program called the Writers Room, and it was bringing writers from Montclair into the room. And that helped sort of close the opportunity gap because we were getting writers into the schools and helping the children. So great ideas that they have.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Griffin, the same question for you.
I think that the teachers need to be surveyed. I think the teachers need to be surveyed to trace the cycle of change from when they felt most valued and when they were happiest in their profession. If you look around our buildings, a lot of teachers have been in the building since they started their student teaching. They can't leave because they can't take those years with them to another district and have the same pay follow them with them. So teachers are staying, but a lot of teachers I've spoken to kind of have been on a roller coaster of emotions. Teachers who feel valued and appreciated and necessary won't leave the district. If we ask teachers for their input and ask them to help design the next wave of our curriculum, the next wave of our brain-based curriculum that brings out the best of their teachers and their own gifts and talents, I think we're going to see a real spike in teachers who want to stay and who want to bring other people in, qualified teachers in with them.
Thank you. Mr. Gale?
Give teachers the support they need. Teachers should be paid fairly. In fact, I still remember a few years ago, this was actually pre-COVID. It was 2019. The teachers, if you recall, pre-COVID, the teachers didn't have contracts, and they were working under their old contracts. And I think what we need to do is that they should give extended contracts for a little longer, because I don't want to have to go history to repeat itself. Want history to repeat itself where the teachers don't have contracts, and then we all have to rally. And then I think the teachers should have contracts. Is very important. In fact, I still remember teachers make a huge impact on students' lives. My 7th grade teacher actually came to my grandfather's Shiva a few months ago. And I even stay in touch with some of my former teachers. So it's very important. Not only teachers should have contracts, but they almost went on strike. So it would be a huge problem if that ever happened. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fryer?
Thank you. First of all, we're underutilizing the talents of our teachers. And as a result, it contributes to being burned out. And I'll give you an example. There are lots of advisory committees at the state level and the federal level. They're working on curriculum. We need to get our teachers into those, first of all, because they would enjoy it, but more important, because they could really contribute so that the curriculums and policies and things that come out of Trenton are not so ridiculous, but in fact are realistic. The second issue is one that I'm afraid, well, I'll just say it. 50% of our teachers receive 75% of the compensation. 50% of our teachers receive 25% of the compensation. The last union contract made this even worse, much worse. If we don't address this, we're going to lose the young teachers because they can't afford to live here. Meantime, the other teachers, I appreciate that they're struggling, but we need to rebalance this. We can't have 50% of the teachers getting 25% of the money and 50% of the teachers getting 75%.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you. I think this starts with one, validating the frustrations and concerns of the teachers, sitting down and having a listening session. I think they felt unheard for a really long time. I think too, from that, there needs to be surveys given out to teachers at all of the schools to get an understanding of what they are, so that we can put together a roundtable, a task force of teachers with representatives from each of the schools, so that we can sit down and really understand what the needs are. And some of those needs that may come up is, there are some district-wide trainings that need to happen, but teachers are not able to pick a lot of the professional development that they may want or need, or where they want to go in that direction as far as being developed. And so really, I think it's about listening and providing solutions that work for the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. The same question to you, Ms. Deisher.
Thank you. I think, like Ms. Shaw and Ms. Griffin said, to include teachers in the conversation and have them have a seat at the table in the decision-making process. I think it used to be a long time ago, a teacher shared with me that the superintendent met with new teachers twice a year, and how great that made young teachers feel. The superintendent knew my name and cared about my opinion. And wouldn't it be nice to bring that back again? Ask teachers, how do we make the district better, and reward creativity and initiative. And I think we really have to acknowledge the teachers as experts in the building. We can look at opportunities to use their expertise in professional development. They can turnkey it to other teachers, mentoring opportunities for our teachers, so they really start taking leadership roles within the building, and time for collaborative planning. I think it's time to recognize the teachers as the true leaders and partners they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Booknight?
Yes. What can the board do to assure teacher retention? This is a countrywide, worldwide issue that we're dealing with. And here in Montclair, and talking with many of the teachers, sometimes they don't feel heard. They don't feel that their expertise is being used to the best of the district's ability. Having a teachers academy with teachers who are very strong in a particular area, and having them mentor and turnkey their knowledge to their teacher friends would be something that we need to implement again. I can remember that, teachers were part of the professional development services that were here in Montclair. I think we need to get back to that. Let the teachers recognize that they are valued and that their expertise is needed here in this district. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Williams?
I'm trying to unmute. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Okay, I think I've heard quite a few wonderful ideas, and because it's showing that how you respect teachers, and I think that's fantastic. One of the ways that teachers can be respected is through transparency. They want to know that what they say means something. They want to be heard, not just among themselves, but from the top down. Dual purpose, and again, this is part of my roadmap, my plan. There's something called teacher expectation for student achievement. This is a program where you work to show how you want to help students achieve. There's a way that you are working with a partner. You can have a couple of partners. Again, this conversation takes place. You and a buddy work together, observe one another, not to critique, not to grade, not to make any formal recommendations as far as what is considered an evaluation. But what it will do is give you the opportunity to share information. I just can't believe that I have talked that long.
We thank you. We do thank you so very much. Mr. Simpson, the same question for you.
Thank you very much. I think that the board needs to start out with a complete change of mindset. It's great to talk to the teachers, but one of the things that I thought of early on was, rather than just talk to teachers, we go to the teachers. I think the board needs to, there's a different dynamic when you have people come to you versus you go to them. And one of my ideas, I thought at the beginning and the end of every school year, I think the entire board should go to each school on their turf and sit down and ask them, what are your objectives this year? How can we help you? And then at the end of the year, we come back and we do it again, but we assess, did we fall short? Did we succeed? How did we do? But it's that mindset that we are not leaders. The people on the board are not leaders. They represent the teachers and the parents. And that's all they are, is representatives. And we need to behave like the teachers are the ones who are in charge and the board members are the ones representing their needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Reverend Katrina Foreman.
Thank you. So this next question will be directed to just 5 of you, and we'll have a separate question for the other 4 following. So this will be for Ms. Dunn, Ms. Deisher, Mr. Gale, Mr. Fryer, and Ms. Booknight. You'll have 60 seconds to respond. And the question is, how would you approach balancing the varied stakeholder needs, including the needs of students, staff, parents, and administrators around complex issues? For example, how might you approach responding to the question of whether Montclair Public Schools should continue to require masking? So we begin with Mrs. Dunn.
I think that it's important, again, because I feel like I keep repeating the same thing, is bringing everyone together and understanding the needs of all involved in this, all of the stakeholders. Even more important, I think it's important if we are talking about masks and, things of that nature. I'm not a scientist, but to utilize the science behind that, but also listening to the stakeholders, not putting the needs of one stakeholder above the other. And I think furthermore, in this instance, this is a very delicate question that causes a lot of emotional responses. But I think as a board member, we have to consider all of those things. And then when a decision is made, because it's not going to be popular with everyone in the community, talking about the factors and the things that were considered in that decision-making process and being really transparent about it, but really listening to those at the table and forging a decision based on that and the science and the recommendations of the state, if we're talking specifically about the mask mandate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Ms. Deisher, to you next.
Hey, another really gigantic question and complicated, but I think it requires really active listening and bringing all the people to the table. And I think as a community, both the board and community members recognizing that a lot of these choices aren't either or, like one's right and one's wrong. Like, for example, the masking. People say follow the science, and I find that hard sometimes for both groups, because on the one hand, following the science, a mask does slow the spread of COVID. But A mask also has some detrimental educational effects, especially for our youngest learners. So either group, there's going to be losers that have followed the science, depending on our decision. As a community, we need to start recognizing this truth, come together willing to hear each other, but then also being willing to leave the table saying, I'm presented my opinion and I have to accept the answer for now, and not have this divisive and arguing going on and on and on. We need collaboration and unity moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eicher. Mr. Gale.
Wow, this is a complicated and hard question. I'm with Melanie on this one. However, while it is important to keep the schools open because it's very healthy for students. However, I am happy, although I am happy that if there's no longer a mask mandate and if they become optional, I am happy that I'm feeling mixed about this issue, by the way, because although I am happy that if that the students pairs with their peers and the teachers and their colleagues and administrators and staff or faculty or whoever, the students, teachers, administrators, faculty, their colleagues, staff, or whoever can finally see each other's faces. Although after the last 2 years of not knowing what they really look like, but while at the same time, it's hard to follow the science too, because we don't know when the next variant is going to come and what it will look like. Again, we don't know when the next variant is going to come and what it will look like. I'm also afraid that if we unmask the children, like right now, the COVID numbers have slowed down, but I'm afraid they'll rise up again. It will be the opposite if the mask mandate comes up. So I'm a little mixed about this mask mandate. Also, in the end,
Mr. Gale, I'm gonna have to stop you there. Thank you. Mr. Fryer, how would you approach balancing the varied stakeholder needs in the community?
I don't see it as being a question of balancing. What I see is we have a whole list of stakeholders. Let's take the teachers. If the teachers are not happy, if the teachers are not productive, our children won't benefit. We also have another one, which is parent education. It's important that we educate the parents, those who may lack in their education, on how to best help the children and how to best work with the teachers. It's important that we deal with the community. It's important that we have a lot of different stakeholders, and the board should set priorities for serving these different stakeholders and go to the administration and say, what is your plan for this year to improve how we deal with parents, how we deal with the children, how we deal with these groups of children, and then hold the administration accountable, agree on how we're going to measure their success, and then at the end of the year, see how well they've done. Sometimes they'll be successful, sometimes they won't be. But we have to start off by setting clear goals and clear objectives and having numbers to follow.
And Ms. Booknight, you'll have the final word on this question of how to balance varied stakeholder needs.
As a board member, there are going to be many complex issues that come before us. Some issues will have a history. Some issues will be emergency issues. I think it's important to listen. Listen to both sides. There'll be pros and there'll be cons for whatever issue that will come before us. But I think the most important stakeholder in all of this are the children. The children, what's best for the children, if it's the child as the stakeholder. If it's the teacher, what's best for the teacher? If it's the parent, what's best for the parenting around the child? If it's for the community, what's best for the community? Again, being in the middle and listening to both sides. And if it has to be a disagreement, agree to disagree. Thank you.
Thank you. So a different question for the remaining 4 candidates. Again, you'll have 60 seconds. How would your presence on the board help to foster a climate in which the community can have difficult conversations with respect and civility? How would you show leadership in this area? And we'll begin with Mr. Simpson.
I was afraid you were going to start with me. I think, as I've said many, many times, let me start over. Many years ago, I was given an opportunity to work on a consulting project for a big company. And the first question I was asked was, how do you deal with difficult clients? And my answer was honest. I said, most people are difficult because they feel like they haven't been heard. And I think that's the way that you sort of bring the temperature down, is you let people know that you're listening. It's less important that your point gets out than the other person is heard. And I think that can help to start bring the temperature down on very difficult questions. And, it's not easy. We're all human beings, but I think what we need to do is to affect, a posture of actually, listening to people, not just listening, hearing what people are saying. And, not everybody, is going to agree with us, but at least we need to respect where they're coming from. It's hard, but I think we need to try. Thank you.
Mr. Simpson. Ms. Williams, we'll hear from you next on this one.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the things that we need to do is work with transparency. We also need to make sure that we are following the restorative justice plan, working with circles. When you're working with groups, it's imperative, and this is where I bring my talents to the table with my background with early childhood and counseling. It's imperative that we have conversations and that we work through the dynamics of group interactions. There's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and it takes everybody being on board, everybody agreeing that, as was mentioned, it's okay to disagree. We also need to make sure that we involve everyone, all the stakeholders, to come together in these group conversations, respecting one another, but what you bring to the table. It's imperative that we do that. We all do this. We all have our same basic needs. Let's show how we can work through those basic needs and share commonalities, have those difficult conversations.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mrs. Shaw.
I think it's so important as a board member to create environment that fosters sort of the best public education, and we need to service the diverse needs of our community. I'm someone who loves to listen to people, and my children might say I'm an over communicator, but I do believe that listening to people who don't share maybe your same viewpoint or perspective is important, and taking all those viewpoints into consideration and making a decision. I think it's so important to hear from everyone, to collaborate with teachers. And I think as the board's role, it's important that they set clear goals and timelines, that we follow up on these audits that we do, that we are transparent with the community, and that we collaborate with all the stakeholders that are involved. I think by doing that, we begin to foster a collaboration and inspire our community to get involved in public education. We inspire our kids to be better. We inspire parents to work together with their teachers and parents.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. And Mrs. Griffin, we will turn to you lastly. How would you help foster a climate of respect and civility?
Well, I'm a mother of 3, and I'm a kindergarten and first grade teacher. So my job is maintaining civility. My job is making sure that everyone gets a turn and that everyone feels heard. My job at home and at work is also to take the tension out of the room, to take away any barriers to education, to communication, to growth, so that we can move forward. A lot of times, if you can take take the heat out of a situation so we can find what's really happening and move forward. So I think as a mother and as a teacher, my presence on the board will crush this.
Thank you, Mrs. Griffin. Thank you, all the candidates, for your responses on these questions. We will turn it over to Reverend Wright for our final question of the evening.
Thank you so very much. Yes, we thank each of you for sharing your ideas and your thoughts. This is the last question of the evening, and each of you will have 90 seconds to respond. This is the question. What question or topic has not been addressed in any of these forums that you think needs to be addressed? State what is the question, and then how would you respond to it? We will begin with Mr. Fryer.
Thank you. I think the question that hasn't been addressed is, it is less expensive and much wiser to replace the school buildings, much cheaper than continue putting money into buildings which have been obsolete for 40 years. When the stairs fell down, they're going to fall down in the other schools. This is a disaster waiting to happen. It's like having an old car that keeps breaking, and you suddenly realize, you know, we'd be better off replacing it and not fixing it. And the irony is that the $60 million that the board is planning on spending, of which 40 million is for ventilation systems, $60 million is the cost to build 4 or 5 brand new elementary schools. Now, of course, we can't build 4 or 5 new elementary schools. What we can do is we can get one site and build one new school, and then we're able to close one while we rebuild it. And this hasn't, I don't understand. Now, when I was on the board, we built a new school. We built the Bullock School, and I found the site for it and was involved in getting the state aid. And we knew then, 20 years ago, that we should be building new schools. Yet, for some reason, the school administration and the school boards have ignored the fact that the schools, these buildings need to be replaced. Not all of them, but many of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Booknight.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Wright. What my question would be to this community, if you went to sleep tonight and you had a dream, what would that dream be for Montclair Public Schools? And I would answer, because this is my dream, that every child here has the opportunity to have instruction that speaks to the pulse of this community, that every stakeholder feels listened to, heard, that the board and the district administrators are seeing what this child, who may not be your child, can be in the next 20 years, successful. That we are utilizing every gift of each professional in this district, that we are seeing children thriving in the community from which they've come, that they will go and be career ready, whatever path they would like to take, that the district sees that the future is in our hands today to have the leaders of tomorrow be those that will be who they want to be, when they want to be.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mrs. Dunn, the same question. What has not been answered, and how would you, what is the question, and how would you answer it?
Wow, so much to be said here, but these are such huge questions. Let me say that again. What comes to mind is something I heard earlier today. What should we, so the question that hasn't been asked is, as a district, what should we do about the parents and students who leave the district every year due to lack of getting their needs met? So this could be Black and Brown students who are honor students who feel like there's not enough rigor in things in the district. So just any example of any person who feels that they had to leave the district because their needs were not met for them and their child. And so my answer to that is, of course, a task force, right? So one, we need to better understand why parents are choosing to leave the district at their key times in the education, right? Going into middle school, whether they feel, if they're feeling like our middle schools are not addressing their issues, and going into the high school. So I think that we really need to do a better job of addressing and listening to those parents and those students, and finding ways to either keep them in the district or bring them back into the district. And there are just many steps that we really need to take to address that, because that shouldn't happen. We should be able to serve all students. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Deischer.
Thanks. I feel the question that would be near and dear to my heart that hasn't been asked is, why does literacy matter so much? It matters because it underpins just about every issue that this district is facing and that affects our kids. It's a gen ed issue, it's an equity issue, and it's a chance to help close the opportunity gap. Improving literacy also certainly impacts the budget. With early identification and prevention programs, which the district is finally embarking on, the number of kids placed in special ed can be reduced by up to 70%. And it costs twice as much to educate a kid in special ed as it does in general ed. We don't need to wait for these kids to fail to place them in special ed or send them out of district. This would save us a lot of money and, more importantly, a child's self-esteem. I would also like to add a couple other questions. How can we celebrate our successes, and what are our strengths? Let's acknowledge those. And as a community, all together, parents, children, teachers, community members, and stakeholders, what are our dreams for our district? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gale?
Enthusiasm, devotion, caring. These are the three words that capture my candidacy. As anyone who knows me can tell you, I love the Montclair school system and the Board of Ed. I deeply care about the students, teachers, administrators, and staff. My priorities for the board are the following: to ensure that students can continue in-person education during the pandemic and keep mask mandates for now indefinitely, to support and advance the goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to better serve special education students by employing more paraprofessionals and adding more inclusion classes, and to adopt policies that promote educational excellence and equity, including teachers earning fair pay and getting the supports they need. Don't you want someone on the Board of Ed who has taken the time to participate in almost every issue? Almost every meeting, listens intently, and participated in the issues? As I noted before, I think I would bring a unique perspective to the board. I am asking for you all to vote for me, Noah Gale, on March 8th. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Gale. Ms. Shaw?
Okay, I'm going to ask and answer a very boring question, but it's actually one that I've been asked a few times this week, so I think it's important to address. I keep getting asked, how is the bond referendum going to affect taxpayers? And I think this is such an important question because a lot of people actually don't understand it, but we have to get a bond because we do not have the money in our budget to make any capital upgrades. And when we do pull a bond and upgrade our buildings, we are investing in our community as a whole, and it does help taxpayers with home prices going up and our schools being in better shape. But the truth of the matter is we actually don't know how it will affect people because right now interest rates are one of the most important parts of the bond. And a bond works like similar to like a home mortgage. You take out a bond, the interest rate's important. And also we're backing off the AAA from the town, which gives us a better, structure of our bond. And so I think it's really important that people understand that it will affect taxpayers, depending on the size of the bond, $200 to $300 probably a year. But I just want to say that I think it's so important that we reach across the aisle to our town council and take care of our senior citizens or those who are on fixed income and try to come up with creative solutions that will help people in this town who are really going to feel the pinch from this bond, because it really does need to happen. And also just educate our community as a whole of why it's important and why they should invest in it. And I also think that we should hit our wish list on the bond referendum.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Mrs. Shaw, excuse me. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you very much. The question that I wish was being asked is why we always talk about schools as sort of an isolated thing here in town. I mean, we pay the 10th highest property taxes in the state, and New Jersey is infamous for very high property taxes to begin with. So we clearly have the resources. The question is, do we have the right priorities? And sometimes I think we don't. I mean, we're looking at these internal squabbles and fights over the library. We can't keep libraries open. In a town like Montclair, that's an embarrassment. So I think the question that I would like to ask is, let's stop talking about the schools as an isolated budget item or an isolated thing over in the corner and look at the whole town's priorities and look at where all of our money is going. Can we take some money away from some programs and put it toward the schools? Can we just get a little bit more creative about how we approach the problems that we've got? How, like I said, we've got the resources. We just need to refocus the priorities, because whether, folks have lived in Montclair for generations or they're newly arrived, the schools matter. And especially for those new arrivals, they moved here for the schools. I know that was part of our calculation, for the schools. So that's really what matters to people. And I think it needs to matter to more people in town. And I think that starts with better communication, explaining why the bond referendum makes sense. And let's, as I like to say, let's invest in hope for the future and not invest in fear of the present. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, the final word for tonight on this question, Ms. Williams.
Thank you. As a Siri reading dyslexia specialist teacher, as an RTI reading teacher for over 20 years, my question would be, what materials would you, the reading teacher, like to have used in your classroom? Thank you for voting for me, Jeanette Williams, to the Montclair Board of Education, Tuesday, March 8th. Time, talents, and tenacity are part of my roadmap. I am retired, therefore I have the time needed for committee work, late and unscheduled meetings. My bio informs you of my talents and expertise. My skills include working with students who have IEPs, as well as recognizing those who may show characteristics of dyslexia and getting evaluations to confirm the evidence, especially with second language learners. I am relentless when asking the why questions, obviously because of my tenacity. So again, time, talents, and tenacity are what I have to offer the Board of Ed. Vote 3A, Jeanette L. Williams, integrity, honesty, and service. Thank you.
Thank you. I just need to make sure that everyone answered the question. I gave everyone an opportunity to answer the question. Okay, thank you. Ms. Griffin, I apologize. I skipped right over it and checked off that I had asked you. So please, if you would certainly answer that question, and my apologies to you.
I think the question that needs to be asked is, how can we take the talent that's in our schools and make our academic programs as innovative and progressive as Montclair itself is, and as a result, hanging on to our families so we don't have people leaving the district. I think what would absolutely be essential to this is to have more collaboration for the teachers throughout the district, not just in the schools, in each individual school in the district, to make sure that the way and the pacing that we're teaching ELA at Hillside is the same as we're teaching at Bradford School, is the same as we're teaching at Northeast, to make sure that all children have access to the same method of practicing math facts as showing what they know in math. If we had Orton Gillingham trained teachers on each grade level in the district, in each classroom building, we would check one more box for how we're really on the cutting edge and using the best practices for our children. there's talk of bringing the gifted and talented program into the school, and bringing that in seamlessly and effectively and executing it will be a real feather in our cap if we can pull it off. And I believe that we can. I do think that we need to have teachers collaborate in their field of expertise to bring back brain-based learning and a interdisciplinary curriculum in all the content areas. Thanks.
Thank you so much to all of the candidates and moderators and to the League of Women Voters for all of the tech. It's really an incredible joy to see so many people who are so passionate and dedicated to our schools, to our community, and who have been involved for so long in improving education for all of us. If you have not yet decided who you're going to vote for, there's still time. There's still time to encourage your neighbors to vote and be ready to vote. We are so grateful for all of the time that you've already put in all of these candidates, and know that even though only 2 of you will be elected in this special election, that 7 more of you will continue to be engaged in improving the schools. And we look forward to seeing the results of the March 8th election. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to Reverend Foreman. Thank you to Reverend Dr. Wright. And good night to everybody.